All righty. So tonight is the doubleheader, the Dreamforce 19 highlights, and the next installment in the Salesforce DX series that we've been doing. Tonight we're going to be talking about frameworks and stuff like that. So this was working. This was working. It was working. It did work. And then he touched it. I don't know. All righty. So again, and we've done our welcome. So again, welcome to everybody who's brand new tonight. Glad to see you.
Oh, look, it worked.
Hey, there you go. The right button.
But I don't know how it works.
The right arrow. There we go. And just a quick introduction. Next slide. It's going to be a night.
Let's just do it the hard way.
Do it the hard way. And again, I'm John Daniel. I'm the Director of Platform Architecture for Rootstock Software. We are ERP on the Salesforce platform, based out of San Ramon, Bay Area. And my esteemed colleague.
Ohad. I run a Salesforce consulting group called Praxis. And I am a developer, solution architect, account manager, everything.
You are everything. Indeed.
Oh, and both John and I are Salesforce MVPs. So does anybody not know what the MVP program is? Okay. So the Salesforce MVP is a community-nominated program where community members like all of us get to nominate people that they think are contributing to the community in a meaningful way. There's a whole nomination process. It's actually open now for the next class of MVPs. So if there's anybody that you know in the community that you think, oh, this person really does a lot, we think they deserve to be recognized for that, then you can go and nominate them for MVPs. Salesforce then does some research about what these people actually do, and they then announce the MVPs around March, I think, every year. And really, it's just a recognition program. The MVPs get to do some cool stuff with Salesforce, but they're really just kind of a brand ambassador, really, when you think about it. There's currently about 220-ish MVPs around the world. So with that, maybe, no?
I told you.
It's like,
it's proximity.
When I'm ready to.
Okay, and that's the beginning of it, and that's John and Ohad. All right, so first of all, of course, for those of you all who are in the Salesforce universe at all, and probably outside, you know that Dreamforce went down. Dreamforce, for those who don't know, is Salesforce's yearly event. They do it out in San Francisco. I think the average population of San Francisco is somewhere around 85,000. So that plus 171,000 of our closest friends descended on San Francisco for a week. It happened 2 weeks ago, the week before Thanksgiving. Yeah, I saw a couple of people out there.
170,000 people registered and showed up for Dreamforce. That's a lot of people to share.
It is a crazy zoo for 4 days and crazy nights. And there is everything going on. They have sessions, if you're familiar with the San Francisco area, the Moscone West. So that's just 2 of the 12 venues or something like that. They were ongoing. All the hotel space was around. If you wanted to have a hotel room downtown, it was $1,000 a night. It was something ridiculous. I mean,
but
it's an insane
expensive. But the Dreamforce is the annual Salesforce conference, right? Where you get to come and learn about anything Salesforce, whether you're an admin, developer, C-level executive, marketing, or really anything that Salesforce does. You can learn about it and learn about new things and new technologies at Dreamforce. And in January 13, we actually are going to have the Dreamforce Global Gathering, which is going to be an event just like tonight, but focused around all the things that were announced in Dreamforce. Since John and I just came back, we figured it would be great if we just share with you what we found really interesting during our time there, and just give you a little kind of a taste of what's to come. And then there will be just more of that in January. So register to that event if you haven't already. So we kind of broke down what we saw and what we thought was worth mentioning as admin-ish stuff and developer-ish stuff. Okay. How is that here?
So first off, There's going to be a lot of links tonight. There's going to be a lot of things. There's going to be a lot of blogs. This is the only link you need to look at tonight. This will be a document that you'll have access to afterwards, and it will contain every link that we possibly can give you for all the different things tonight. So this is your one and only link that you need to copy. If you don't catch it, you'll catch it at the end of the presentation when we display it again.
We'll also post this slide into our Trailblazer community group. And this document will also have a link to the slide in it as well. So you'll be able to find all of this content however you want.
So do it.
Okay, admin, go for it. So first thing, the new Salesforce mobile app. So who here has used the Salesforce mobile app in the past? Who here liked using the Salesforce mobile app? Okay, liar. You have to say it, you work for Salesforce.
You work for Salesforce, you don't know. No.
The reality is, while it's really interesting because the Salesforce mobile app was kind of how Salesforce started the whole Lightning direction before Lightning was even something that they shared with anybody. But when Lightning actually became a thing, it kind of started departing the mobile app, and there was a real disparity between what you could see in the desktop and what you could see in the mobile app. So the mobile app, which was in pilot for the last 5 or 6 months and has now been brought into beta, or actually, sorry, GA, general availability, actually has a lot of new capabilities, new navigation, new capabilities, but also the ability to expose Lightning Web Components in the mobile app. And that's a big thing for anybody who's ever decided to use LWC to create custom UIs, custom components to collect data from your customer, from your users, right? So if you haven't downloaded the latest version, do it. There is actually some information. I think you still need to enable it in the setup menu, but beyond that, it's just plug and play like the Salesforce mobile app typically has been. Personally, I think it behaves a little better. Even my biggest complaint with the older version was speed. And this one is a little better. I wouldn't say it solves all the world's problems as far as that is concerned, but definitely an improvement. Okay, so Salesforce announced the Trailhead mobile app. So now you can do Trailheads on your phone, wherever you are, in the car, not driving, bus, waiting in the doctor's waiting room. The downside, it's only on iOS, iPads, and iPhones. So Android, you'll have to wait probably another year or so before you can do that on Android. It's part of the whole Apple Salesforce partnership, exclusivity agreements, and all this other fun stuff. Trailhead Live. So Trailhead Live is actually really cool because now you have access to not only Trailhead modules where you can learn about read, do either the test or the hands-on, but you can actually have access to professionally recorded content, basically watch live classes on Trailhead, which is pretty cool. So all of this has been announced. Dynamic forms. So dynamic forms are, has anybody heard of dynamic forms here? Okay, dynamic forms are really cool. They are essentially the evolution of page layouts. So anybody who's ever created a Lightning page knows that the Lightning page is kind of this weird combination of your Lightning Web Components, your Lightning page, and also the page layout, right? So you need to have related lists to be able to put them, even if you want to have them as an independent related list as a component, they have to be on the page layout for the user to have access to them. And then, you know, you have to organize everything on the page layout, and you have to make sure the right page layout is assigned to the user and all that. So dynamic forms are in essence saying goodbye to page layouts. And now everything becomes a Lightning Web Component. So now not only will you have your Lightning Components drop down, you'll also have fields, and you can actually drag fields right onto the Lightning Web Component, Lightning page, sorry. And more importantly, you can now use the same visibility criteria that you use on other Lightning Web Components on fields and sections in the page. So now your pages finally come into like the 21st century, right? And you can have fields that only appear if the opportunity stage is a certain stage, or only for certain user based on custom permissions, profiles, or other criteria that you can define in the components visibility section. So this has been a long time coming. It's been discussed for probably about a year now. There were a lot of technical challenges for Salesforce to actually get it to where it is now. It's coming as a pilot. So pilots are before betas. You actually have to contact your Salesforce account executive to request to be a part of the pilot. They're coming as pilots to sandboxes first. They want to test performance and stuff like that in real world cases. And the expectation is that I think summer next year, it's expected to go into GA. And don't quote me on the summer next year, but I think it's mid next year that they're expecting to push it to GA. Yes. In essence, it is decoupling it, yes.
I'm sorry,
and
what was the question?
So the question, thank you. The question was if dynamic forms is a decoupling of page layouts from Lightning Page. And in essence, that's what it is. There's actually two more important things that you just remind me to say. First of all, you can start a Lightning web page from scratch and drag everything. There's also a tool that allows you to take a page layout and convert it to a Lightning dynamic form. So if you already have a page layout and you want to use that as your starting block, you don't have to rebuild it from scratch. You just say, take this page layout and convert it into a dynamic form. So thank you. Einstein Voice. So Einstein, everybody knows the Einstein name. Salesforce has demoed the Einstein Voice. Was it the TDX or was it Dreamforce last year?
TDX.
TDX, they demoed it. They started trying to create the buzz. Salesforce, I think, is the only technology company that made it acceptable to announce a feature about a year before it becomes publicly available. Right? If Apple announced the next iPhone and says you can't have it for a year, they won't do very well, right? But with Salesforce, Einstein Voice is actually coming now. It will be available on Alexa, Google, and Google Assistant, and I think also on Siri. And it's coming as beta in 2020, February 2020 right now. And one of the great things they did announce at Dreamforce is that, unlike everybody's expectation, it is going to be included. It's a free within the standard Salesforce license. So everybody thought it was going to be another SKU you have to purchase, but not the case. They actually have very aggressive goals. They want to make Einstein Voice a really big part of the platform. And what is Einstein Voice, by the way? That's a way for you to interact with your Salesforce data using voice, but using natural language processing, right? So you can say things like, what's my meetings today? Or, add a product to the opportunity I have with CarMax. And the idea is to make it very, very natural language kind of driven. So you can interact with the data, update it, query it using your voice only. It's computer generated, whatever that is. I don't remember. They bought a company that actually does the text-to-speech technology that they use. But honestly, who cares at this point? They're all, very good at this point. If you know something, I'm not saying so. Chris. Yeah, not my accent, that's for sure. Thank God. Salesforce Data Mask. So this is actually going to be a pretty cool tool. My understanding is this is an additional SKU, i.e. a license a tool you'll have to purchase for them. But the idea here is you can actually take a sandbox and you can then mask your data. So if you have a full sandbox or a developer sandbox and you want to anonymize data or just really mask email addresses and phone numbers so that in testing, emails don't go out to customers and so on, this tool will allow you to do masking of data as you deploy into sandboxes. Am I saying that right?
You are saying it right.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly when, I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, and there's no information about the data mask exactly when it's coming out. I don't think that's been announced yet. So Customer 360 Truth. So Salesforce has been starting to use this Customer 360 terminology last year at Dreamforce, I think. Yep. It's their idea of let's bring all of the data from everything into one place. And it was part of the acquisition of MuleSoft that they kind of came with this whole concept of Customer 360. And if you think about the term customer 360, all it really means is being able to go to one place and know everything I need to know about my customers, right? So if you have ERP systems, you want to know what orders, what orders they placed, right? You want to know support cases inside Salesforce. You want to know potentially open invoices for maybe a financial system, you know, what we have marketed to them from a marketing system, you know, what are they doing on commerce system. Bringing all of this information into one place to see it is the promise of the Customer 360. What they announced now in Dreamforce is that Customer 360 Truth, which aims to make Salesforce the single source of truth. Now, Mark Benioff tried to say SSOT during the keynote. He failed miserably multiple times. So he kept saying, try to say SSOT 3 times. So if you can do it, make sure you tweet at Mark. But again, the idea here is actually, so again, there's a little bit of vagueness about what this Customer 360 Truth really is going to be. But in essence, the way that I interpret it is essentially making Salesforce into sort of a master data management, MDM tool. And again, if anybody in the room, including you or you, know anything more than that, please tell me. We do have some links that have some more information, formal information, so feel free to navigate and read more about it. Do I have anything else in there?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
Awesome.
Take over.
So from the developer side, there were a lot of different things, some minor things, and there were a couple of really cool big ones. And the first one, and a lot of people in the room will like this, source tracking for sandboxes. And so what this really means is we've had DX, among DX, one of the features of DX allowed us to change the way we lay out our source control, makes it a lot more logical, more easier to manage, easier to work with. And it was very good because the tools that worked with DX allowed us to program and make changes locally, and it would push you to a scratch org, which is a scratch org is nothing but it is basically a Salesforce environment that's disposable. And if I made any changes in the scratch org, it would pull all of those out. And so the tool manages the tracking of the source changes back and forth between scratch orgs. Now they're announcing support for sandboxes. So this will be an interesting thing because there's still a lot of companies out there that are utilizing sandboxes, working with sandboxes, but they still want that ease of use that we're seeing on the DX side when we're working with scratch orgs, developer scratch orgs, where if I just make a change to a process builder, visual flow, or something like that, and I want all those changes to immediately come out. If I create a new object inside the UI, I don't need to remember exactly where it was or what it was, and I can bring it all out. This is going to be actually pretty huge, especially for companies that are still doing a lot of development through sandboxes, and they haven't been able to transition over to scratch orgs yet. So it's going to be interesting the way they play it out and give support. So look for that to come in the future. I know at least one person's going to be excited about it. The Lightning-based components. So these are all the components that build the Lightning pages. Now they've open sourced this. So if there is a bug, fix it yourself. All right. Don't wait for Salesforce. Go grab it, clone it, fix it, and make it happen. So this has been a lot of hardcore UI and UX developers. We're excited about this being available. LWC.
They don't have the what?
It's right. So the question is it LWC, Lightning Web Components, or the OR, which is the original Lightning framework? It is LWC. Because honestly, there's a lot of trash in Aura. They admit it. And Aura was built at a different time. And for the most part, Aura is starting to phase out. The area of focus is like LWC going forward. So that's huge. Salesforce blockchain now in developer preview. So as Ohad alluded to, Salesforce is probably the only company out there that will announce the technology and won't deliver for another year. They announced it last year. They're starting to deliver going forward. But if you're familiar with the blockchain circles, it's an interesting scenario. From an ERP perspective, when I've got a lot of different things moving all over manufacturing plant, interesting to have blockchain signed type data blocks and distributed accounting software.
Distributed ledgers.
Ledgers, thank you. Ledgers is the word I'm looking for. So it's an interesting thing. If you're interested into blockchain or get excited, the developer preview is coming out probably within the next few months. So Local development is now in beta. So what is local development? Local development was announced at Trailhead DX. And for those who don't know, Trailhead DX is the alternate or the opposite of, or the other event that they have, Salesforce has. It happens usually in May or June, and it is usually focused for the development community. Much smaller event, only about 20,000 of my favorite friends come in San Francisco. They announced at this past Trailhead DX, local development. And what this really means is basically every bit of development that you do, you hit save, and what happens under the hood is that it takes that change and pushes it up to a script, Salesforce org somewhere. Then you refresh your browser and you see the change. So no matter how fast they're going to make that, there's still a lag time. They've got to go across the wire and make that. Local development basically brings a runtime engine locally to your laptop. You can make a change and see it instantly from local 8080 or some other. So it's like, duh, this is a concept that's been around for all the technology stacks forever. But think about it. How do you bring an entire Salesforce org locally and keep it static and keep it connected? So there's been a lot of work going into that. They've been piloting it over the past few months. It's going into beta very soon. And it'll be with Lightning Web Components is the first feature that you'll be able to take advantage of going forward. I'm excited about it because, again, safe harbor, I'm hearing all kinds of lovely rumors that local development will go beyond Lightning Web Components. It'll go to Apex development. It'll go to full Flourish development. And that's going to be a big, huge change. So this is good.
Safe harbor.
Oh, everything I say is safe harbor. Everything I say is safe harbor. All right, next one, please. Okay, so this is probably the biggest announcement from the developer side. A couple of y'all, if you've had conversations with me, you've heard me talking about this crazy idea that Salesforce has been having. What if you could take the processing power of a Java application or a Node.js application, something that is logically and computationally very heavy, hard to deal with? Apex, unfortunately, is not the best language to deal with that. With governor limits, you are constrained into how much processing you can actually achieve. So what do you do when you need these computationally intensive things? From Rootstock's perspective, we have an entire nightly manufacturing or process where we pull and process all the requests and the orders, work orders, all the different changes that go into a larger MRP system. And that can take literally several hours to accomplish in some cases. But now, you've got Heroku over here, and Heroku has been able to run with Node.js and Java, and you've been able to program these features and these processes over on Heroku side for a while now and see much better performance results. So Evergreen is now this whole adaptation. Maybe have you heard Amazon Web Services, Lambda functions, serverless functions? It's the buzzword out in the community. I think so, if I remember what Blazor is all about. But basically, you have a project, you have a Salesforce project with your Apex code, your Lightning, whatever goes into your Apex project. You also have a subdirectory, which basically might be a Java project or a Node.js project, which has all that computationally intensive stuff. And so what happens is you might have the ability to you trigger something, or you work in the Salesforce environment, you make an update to an account, and now you want to go and do some large ordering and fulfillment or something like that in the back-end system. So now what you're going to end up doing is you'll make a change to the account. It will probably trigger a platform event. This platform event will then trigger a function that's listening to it. Think about this. This is a Node.js or a Java application. It gets compiled. So say it's a Java, it's a jar file, it gets compiled, and it's actually sent over to a dedicated server, a Heroku or some AWS type dedicated server for processing. And it's connected to your org. So when it sees that platform event come through, it triggers the processing to go through. It has native access to the data that you have in your org, and it will process a whole lot faster than before. So this is monstrously large. Again, they've been teasing for a year, at least some circles they've been teasing for over a year that this is coming. This is, there's been a lot of talk about it over the past summer. They hinted at it a little bit at Trailhead DX, and now they're saying it's on its way. They did do a demo. It's actually quite an interesting demo. Hopefully we'll be able to show that at Global Gathering next month. And I'm hearing that it'll go into developer preview after the first of the year. And so Node.js will be the first language that's supported, but eventually they'll support Java. And they're also potentially going to support other languages like Apex as well. So it's going to be interesting. So any questions about this? This is a very deep, deep subject here. So the question is, you know, the Node.js has a lot of libraries. If you're familiar with Node.js.com, it's a monster. It means like millions and millions of artifacts and libraries that are available. The environment, since it's operating as a Node executable, has complete access to all of those. And it has, the same would be true for Java. So the Apache Maven, the artifact repository, it has access to all of those types of things. And you can build the app accordingly and take advantage of all these different features, like you were saying, the PDF generator, something like that. You know, some of the craziest attempts of people trying to, there was one crazy attempt at somebody trying to zip up a file using nothing but Apex.
ZipX, love it.
Yeah, ZipX, it's, you know, but it's those kind of crazy, it was an interesting read, but still it's, the Salesforce platform, the Apex language is not really fit for doing that kind of computationally intensive thing. Something like this though, is going to be a huge, huge win for them.
And in fact, the demo that they showed during the developer keynote was exactly that, using a standard NPM package for generating PDF and using it to generate the PDF. Now, of course, everybody knows you can generate a PDF using Visualforce, but everybody who's ever tried it knows how much it sucks and how limited you are. So now this really opens the door for you to do things with open, you know, with NPM packages to generate more complex, more sophisticated PDFs, or really anything, right? Image manipulation, zipping files, anything that's computationally heavy.
And the
you didn't really have a way. You had to go out of the platform before, right? What?
The governance limits in this arena are much more relaxed.
Yep.
So again, that in and of itself makes this worth it. So
now, the one thing that isn't clear yet is, again, pricing. There will likely be a price associated with this. But
it's not the only thing that's not clear.
Well, there's a bunch of things, but again, fair warning, I like to say it because that's the first thing I ask, right? Is this going to be free or is it going to cost me?
I never worry about price.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's just not clear yet. There's no full disclosure from Salesforce.
But the other thing is, think about all the Node.js and Java developers out there that are trying to break into the world of Salesforce. This is going to be huge. How many people are having problems finding skilled resources in the world of Salesforce? I mean, you know, this is going to open up a lot of questions, a lot of things. So next one, please. Entity interfaces. This is probably the most mind-bending new development in Salesforce. What this is, think about Salesforce has a standard quote data object, the quote object. If you're familiar with SteelBrick, the company that acquired CPQ, they had their own quote object. Well, what if you had to look at the data that was spread out across both of the objects? How do you kind of look at it? And so there's been a lot of homegrown recipes around querying one object and trying to marry that against the information. There's a lot of commonality and stuff like that. So entity interfaces, the way it was described is that it's a new look holistically at the S object or the data object layer. And just like everybody's, well, not everybody, excuse me. As a developer, you're familiar with Apex interfaces. And Apex and interfaces in general allow you to describe a contract. These functions will be part of an Apex class that implements this interface. So when you're working with code, when you're working with one code versus another, it's easy to work with it in a loosely coupled manner, much easier decoupled fashion. You know that it's not necessarily this one thing. It's a lot of different types of things that you can work with. So think about this now from a data layer. Say if you could describe an entity interface that talks about the quote. And as long as the key things that are described in an interface are both in your quote object versus your CPQ quote object versus your own custom quote object versus some other thing, maybe even not even the quote at all. Now you can sort of start to interact with the data collectively and query it, but not necessarily custom craft each query to each table. You can custom craft the generic query better. Again, this is something that they've announced. It's a lot of information still yet to come. It's going to be interesting. I will say that I had a conversation with the Apex product manager. He's the guy who builds Apex, and he said this is the foundation for some really cool things that they're going to be able to do going forward long term. So this is, again, something to watch, and we'll be paying attention to it.
We have that twice. Okay. I
have that twice, so apparently it was good news twice. And this is not even related to Dreamforce, but this was announced just that week. Salesforce has started a developer podcast. And so Josh Burke, he's a developer evangelist out there. He's been going around interviewing a lot of different Salesforce developers that are leaders in the community and doing a podcast. This is, I think there's about 5 episodes. I think they launched one this morning. They posted one this morning that was for the Hammer tool that ISVs use. There's already been one talking about PMD, which is a open source library to check the code health of your content. So check this out. It's, if you're interested in or into podcasts. It's going to be some good information, good talks, good interviews coming out of that. So just that's an extra tidbit. So anyway, so moving on now into the second phase. We're a little bit behind schedule, but that's all right. We're going to catch up now. We've been talking for the past few months about Salesforce DX and what it takes to adopt DX, what goes into adoption of DX, and what to look at. Tonight's topic is all about frameworks. And so what we're talking about is when you're moving to DX, especially if you have an existing environment, an existing org, not everything that's existing will move into DX very easily, very cleanly. A lot of orgs, a lot of environments that have been around for a long time have grown up without any constraints. And there's been a lot of bad practices, a lot of code that's intermingled and mangled. And now Salesforce is pushing this new idea, DX, scratch orgs, making it easier to develop, put everything into multiple packages. But how do you get there? How do you do that? So while DX has been around for a couple of years now, there have been clearly, if you've been watching the community very well, there have been clearly examples of very bad failed attempts. Attempts made to take what has been called the happy soup, pick it up, drop it into a package, or if you were successful in actually breaking it apart into 2 bits, you've got blob 1 and blob 2. And so it becomes, you know, it's not just, I talked about it last time, it's not just about making the goal of getting to DX, not about putting things into a package. It's about doing it in a way that's sustainable and it allows for growth going forward. So we're going to talk about some of the frameworks that I've seen over the past 3 years that have been, the recipe together has been very successful. I've seen in at least 4 implementations already. And so we're going to talk about that. So let's hit this first one. Let's talk a little bit about the need first. So let's talk about the problem. So, you know, again, like we were talking about, you want to change your code base to an existing code base to Salesforce DX. There's some questions that you're going to ask. Is your code base ready to change? And some of those questions include, you know, can your code be separated into discrete logical modules that can live by themselves? You know, where do you begin? This is the biggest question I hear in DX conversion and DX adoption everywhere. How do I begin? What's the first piece that I pull? And, you know, is your code base properly segmented both horizontally in layers and vertically as far as business units and whatnot? And another way you've heard me talk about this is the age-old principle of separation of concerns. Is the architecture that you have properly set up so that you can easily move things around? Is it discrete modules? So the next one. And the last thing that we're going to find is circular references. And circular references, and go ahead and tap the last one, please. Circular references, in my opinion, is going to be the biggest thing that will prevent you from moving into DX, and especially unlock packages or second generation packages. So we're going to talk about this. So circular references, you know, circular references have been known to developers in Java and other languages for many years now. When you might have class A that depends on class B, and there might be some line in class B that depends on class C, and there might be a line in class C that depends on class A. Well, if A needs to be deployed by itself, you know, how can A be deployed if it has a reference on B? So B has to be there. If B has a reference on C, then you have to deploy C first. But if C has a dependency on A, then you've got this circular dependency reference. And so circular references are bad. Unfortunately, in the world of Salesforce, we have done quite a bit. And okay, you jumped a whole lot of room, but think about this example for you. You've got a support case management module. And the orange thing about the support entry, it's a Visualforce page. It has a dependency on the support controller, an Apex controller. Green is Apex controller. And that controller might have a dependency on the data object support event. But if you ever looked at the support event, you know, you might be able to override the new field and go to a different page. So instead of having Salesforce's standard page layout, you can override the new button to go point to an actual other page or another Visualforce page. Well, maybe this goes and overrides to the support event page. And that has a dependency on support controller. And then you've got support controller down on the dependency to support technician data object. So without even thinking about it and without even trying very hard, your support entry page now has a dependency on support technician data object. And you didn't even want that to happen. So this happens all the time in the world of Salesforce. In the world of classic Salesforce development, what we've had for 15 odd years now, this is running rampant throughout this world. You cannot break this apart very easily. Now, like I said, if you wanted to take all of this and drop it out, pull it out of Happy Soup and put it into one single package, that probably would work. Because again, as long as everything is deployed at the same time to an org, Salesforce will honor all the dependencies and you'll be able to get away with it. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what happens though if you have an additional module? Next click. Say you have the sales account manage module. And in the sales account, you have all the standard stuff. You have the new special account page, which has the special account controller as a dependency. And then that has a dependency on the standard account object. And then there's also a special contact data object. So again, this is all standalone, pretty easy, simple stuff. And again, that probably will go into its a package all by itself. But what if we go back to our first example and we see our support controller has a reference to our special contact? Well, I mean, if I'm doing support, I want to know who it is that I'm doing support on. So now, if this dependency lives, that means I have a dependency where support case management module or package cannot be deployed if the sales account module is not first deployed. So dependencies across packages are not bad as long as they make sense. Logically speaking, support cases don't have much to do with account management. As an architect, I would question why my developers on support case need to have the account management app installed in order to do their development work on support case. And so now we're getting into, now that we're in second generation packaging, it's pushing us as architects and developers to think about our applications in a much more modular way. Can we find ways to make sure that we don't introduce coupling where we don't need to? Another crazy example would be, what if the account object had a lookup field all the way back to support event? And it's definitely a possibility, especially when they Happy Soup org, because people don't think about it. They add those kind of dependencies all day long. And again, now we've got an extremely circular dependency. You can't have the support module, the support case module installed without sales account module, but you can't have the sales account module installed without support case. People are getting very frustrated in the community about how to manage these dependencies, separate these dependencies, and even they're throwing their hands up in the air and saying, well, screw it, I'm just going to make one big Happy Soup package. Well, if that's the case, you're missing the point. There are ways to deal with this, and it's not anything relatively new, but it's stuff that other technologies have been dealing with for years. Java has multiple packages that they deal with, and that's all they deal with. This is not a new problem. Java's already solved it for many years ago. Who's heard of the Java Juice framework, but also the oh my God, I'm drawing a huge blank. The Spring framework in Java. Spring framework is all about dependency injection and managing the dependencies across and injecting things at the last second. Inversion of control is a principle that we've heard about, We haven't heard that much about it in the world of Salesforce, but it does bear relevance here. So as you can see, we've got this kind of crazy scenario, and we want to achieve at least two different packages, but now we have questions like, how do we manage the inter-package references? And so that's where these frameworks are going to help us get along and make this happen. So next slide, please. So why do we need frameworks in general? Again, they provide solutions to things that have already been solved at an architectural level. Typically, when you're designing an application, for example, the rootstock package, the ISV package, there's two layers of architecture. There's the domain architecture, and then there's the technical architecture. The domain architecture is all about the custom logic, the processes, the very specific intellectual property that we have that makes our product unique. There's also this technological or technical architectural foundation. And this is all about making your application very loose coupled, very easy to work with, very easy to extend, more stable, all these different things that you know and love, but that are common throughout every application involved. So the frameworks deal with the architectural questions at the bottom level. They help reduce the complexity in enterprise development. I mean, we just got into that last example. I mean, think about that last example in a happy soup environment in an enterprise org. You know, CarMax, Cisco, all of these different organizations that are large organizations hire, they have lots of different teams, lots of different pieces of development going on at the same time. That's huge complexity going into the world of enterprise development. So now we need a way to help us manage the complexity and help reduce it, or at least get it organized. Because complexity, if it's organized, is still better than complexity and chaos. The frameworks introduce a prescriptive way to approach or accomplish things like dependency injection. And basically, they give you an example of how to go about doing these types of things. And so we'll come back to that in a little bit. And next one. So the first one we're going to talk about is Apex Commons. So Apex Commons, and you might hear it also referred to as FFLIB. FFLIB is short for Financial Force Library. So let's go ahead and click on the buttons. So it was originally created by Andy Fawcett and the Financial Force development team. So Financial Force, for those of you who don't know, is an ISV out there that's been around for about 12, maybe 13 years, somewhere in that range. The first app was the accounting app that they have, an accounting product. They moved into...
They've been around before Salesforce said ISVs can't use the word force in their names.
Yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. God, that goes back a ways.
That's a while.
They started out with an accounting package. They moved on to other things like professional services, automation, human capital management. But they had a background, a development team that came from their parent company at the time. Who's heard of, well, no, we'll come back to that. Andy Fawcett at the time was the CTO of Financial Force. Andy Fawcett has now moved on. And if you were at Dreamforce, you saw him on stage during the developer keynote. He's now the VP of engineering at Salesforce. With a very, very smart individual. My IQ goes up a sevenfold when I'm just close to and talking to him. It's interesting. And I said this is the base framework that they utilized for their flagship products. Next one, please. This framework was derived from what they've called enterprise architecture or enterprise patterns. So who's here familiar with Martin Fowler? A couple of people in the room. So Martin Fowler, if you don't, he is one of the leading thought, he's one of the thought leaders in the world of enterprise architecture, technical development. Has nothing to do with Salesforce, never seen written a bit of code of Apex, but he published a series of books. One of them in particular came out in around 2003 or so, called Patterns of Enterprise Architecture. If you're familiar with the book Design Patterns by the Gang of Four, again, another great work about common problems and how to solve them in a systematic way. These books are all about learning from other people's failures so that I don't repeat them. So Andy Fawcett was a big fan of Martin Fowler's book, and he wrote his own counterpart to it. It's called Lightning Platform Enterprise Architecture. The book was just released a week and a half ago. It's the third edition or third installment of this book, and it talks about enterprise architecture development in the world of Salesforce. If you haven't gotten that book, I wholly recommend that you get that book right now, please. It's on Amazon, Lightning Platform Enterprise Architecture. It's a fabulous book. It is the staple of real serious development in the world of Salesforce. The framework is the manifestation of these patterns, these principles that were pioneered by Martin Fowler and then promoted by Andy Fawcett. And so basically it encourages best practices. It helps the developers focus on common things like bulkifying your code. You know, it's a simple thing. You know, with government limits, we tell all our new developers, bulkify your code. And a lot of times that's lost in translation on a new developer. But these frameworks give you tangible examples about how to organize your code, how to organize your code in layers so that you have different separation of concerns. Separation of concerns, again, is this idea in development that allows you to organize your code in the most loosely coupled way and the best way for maintenance long term. Next slide. The framework encourages developers to standardize their way that they do data access querying and how they organize the logic focused around specific data objects, the domain pattern, and then how you deal with logic that spans multiple domains, which is the service pattern. And then finally, proper management of cross-object DML operations, which is called the unit of work pattern. So Andy goes into all of this in great depth in his book. And he also there is also an open source
version
framework on GitHub that you download, install in your org, and just start building off of it going forward. So there's been a lot of adoption of the Financial Force Apex Commons library over the years, and it's been always very good success. And developers like myself swear by it all day long. So
there's a bunch of blogs. We'll add it to the document that we'll share with you that give you anything from, you know, the introduction. Hey, I'm a developer, but I never really worked with enterprise patterns. So they give you the whole overview of what is separation of concern, why do we need it? What is this selector layer, the domain layer, the services and unit of work and how to use them. And from that, you, like everything else as a programmer, if you've ever written any lot of code, the best way to learn is do it yourself, right? So once you start playing with it, it really, if you had done any kind of Apex development for a while, it clicks, right? Once you start doing it, it really makes a lot of sense why you do this.
Someone once told me this analogy. The Apex Developer Guide. Hopefully everybody who's doing Apex has seen that. The Apex Developer Guide gives you the vocabulary of the Apex language. This lets you know how to tell a true story in the world of Apex. Think about that kind of a difference there. So again, if you haven't looked into it, like I said, there's a ton of reading lists and we're behind schedule already. So let's keep moving. Apex Mocks is another open source library, again, from the Financial Force library. It is a mocking framework to help with the ease of development of proper unit tests. One of the biggest issues with unit tests is when you have all of this complicated infrastructure of code, how do you block out just the piece that you need to test? How do you mock only that one piece, and then, or how do you test that one piece and mock everything else around it? So it's been kind of modeled after the Java mocking framework Mockito that's been around for many years. Again, development by the Financial Force development team. And it works in concert with the Apex Common framework in that the Apex Common framework teaches you how to separate various layers. So if you have a service tier and you have a couple of domains, you mock the domains, and it becomes very easy to identify where you put those pieces together. So like I said, that allows developers to more comprehensively test and evaluate your logic. Because trust me, I've done some very bad testing when I don't have this framework available. So.
And I will say that about Apex Mocks is that it's probably more difficult to comprehend than just understanding Apex Commons. If you've never worked with mocking, especially if you don't understand why you need mocking, John has kind of run through it again just for the sake of time. Mocking is an extremely important thing, especially again in enterprise level development where you have a really wide code base and you really need to be able to test things in kind of very, very focused area. I just wanted my test class to test this class, but I don't want to have to instantiate all of the different things that it depends on, right? So that's where mocking allows you to mock all of these other things that you would have otherwise needed.
Yeah, there's a ton of reading.
Way more to say about it.
Yeah. A third framework is the Force DI framework. DI is short for dependency injection. Click that. Okay, we didn't dump it all. Okay, let's go back a page. There we go. It is a generic Apex dependency injection library. It supports dependency injection with Apex classes, Lightning, flows, Visual Force, you name it. It was created again by Andy Fawcett, who we've talked about. Another guy named Doug Ayers. Doug Ayers, if you don't know him, he used to be a Salesforce MVP out of Tennessee area, I believe. And now he works for Salesforce specifically. He's one of the lead engineers on the Trailhead group projects. And then myself. It was modeled on the Google Juice dependency injection framework, if you're familiar with that. And if you use that in Java, then that's where we built this from. But it provides an easy cookie cutter systematic way to inject one component into the operation of logic at runtime. And so that allows for what is called loose coupling. And what that does is just opens up, it allows you to swap things in and out. It allows you to do things like swapping mock objects into position so that you can use to test it. But again, this framework standardizes this whole concept of dependency injection. I was using a homegrown version prior to this. That's what piqued Andy's interest, is the work that I had done. And we were able to craft this off the, so it's a very good framework. It's been battle tested for over 1.5 years now. And definitely is pretty cool. It's, the injection is inserted by custom metadata type records, which is a very interesting concept, because now you can deploy records and changes from one environment to another and inject whole new bits of logic just by adding a new custom metadata type record into the mix. So the possibilities there are huge. And again, you'll find that if you take it, it works very well across multiple packages. Can't go into that due to time constraints. Excuse me? When I say Lightning, do I mean Aura? In this case, yes, I do. And because dynamic instantiation of Lightning Web Components is yet to be developed. So when that comes about, Doug Ayers put that piece of functionality in. He is waiting for when Lightning Web Components support dynamic web content, and if it does, right. So yeah, so will we see LWC supported by ForceDI? We'll find out. And so that's that. AT4DX is short for Advanced Techniques for Salesforce DX Adoption. And this is a framework created by myself and another guy named John Story. So 2 years ago, when I started talking about DX and packaging, I said we're going to go out and make it. And so basically the effort that I did there turned into this framework that we see today. Basically, the framework here orchestrates the previous 3 frameworks to work in second generation packaging. It solves the questions about coupling across packages and how do you bring all the different pieces. The Apex Common by itself has been around long before DX arrived. And so the final question of how does it operate in multiple packages is what AT4DX deals with. So let's see, next one. Again, it offers a common solutions for common problems, things like centralized application factory. The application factory is a tool that you'll discover within the Apex Common framework. And it basically provides a single point or factory instance that all the other pieces of the application are already generated from. Next click. And it uses application factory injection to solve that. Distributed elements of a single S object across multiple packages. So the last example when we were talking about the need, where we're saying one package had a lookup to another field, or excuse me, a lookup to another S object. Well, the S object is in one package, but that field can live in a second package. And so then there's questions like, well, how do I add that field to my query at runtime when that package is installed? And so you got to start thinking about things a little bit differently. Selector field injection is where this is accomplished and goes forward. Selector method injection is again another attempt at it. So I might have methods that are specific to package B that would never exist in package A because there might be some fields that don't exist in package A. Next one. Distributed actions and logic across multiple packages. And so that would be the subscriber-based platform events and domain process injection. So these are the techniques that the framework offers and makes available to you. So again, these are all very deep subjects. I will provide the reading information for you going forward. So, quick note about all of these frameworks. Thank you. Just at Dreamforce, we announced the Apex Enterprise Patterns Group. Go ahead and start clicking on it, please. All of the frameworks that we have talked about tonight have been centralized now to under one banner. The Apex Enterprise Framework open source group now hosts all of them. All of the repos are you can find them at github.com/apex-enterprise patterns. You can appreciate Financial Force was bogged down a good bit trying to support their stuff, and then Andy Fawcett had the ForceDI framework. I had the AT4DX. We felt that all of these work really good together. Let's put them all under one banner. These repos are maintained by various community leaders: Andy Fawcett, Doug, Stephen Wilcox from Financial Force, Dave Esposito from Patron Technology, Kevin James from Financial Force, and myself. These guys have been around for quite a while, and a lot of good stuff. So look for a lot of good improvements to all of these frameworks going forward. So next one. The next one. And these are the links. Again, we're going to post all these later into the document, but a lot of these frameworks come with sample code implementation, so you can just play around with it and get the feel for what's going on. Next one. And again, more resources. Again, all the topics and code frameworks we talked about is the same link that we showed earlier. So this will be your one-stop shop. If you go to it in 5 minutes, you won't see everything. Give us about 24 hours. And
a lot of the links are there, but there's a lot of the reading resources that John has been talking about that we haven't had.
If you ever work with me, you hear me talk about the reading list. So I'm going to dump the reading list into this document because it is just a lot in this framework area that just
be warned, this is more than a weekend of reading.
This is far more than that. Who's in the room that's seen the reading list? And
Pradeep, raise your hand.
So it's, yeah, Pradeep, you better raise your hand. So anyway, next one. And this is you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So when we started the DX series, we did Introduction to DX. We asked you what topics you guys want to see, what order, and so on. And so we started with the transition into DX. That was our second in the series, or really the first. The last meetup was about separation of concerns. We talked in much more detail than today. And of course, then to take it back, the first one was the Introduction to DX. The second one was the transitioning. Today is the separation of concerns and frameworks. And then the next meetup after the January one will be around the source-driven versus org-based development. So we all know that DX was all about makes this source control your source of truth, but they realized that not every organization can just magically convert all their code to DX, as John has been saying a lot. And so they realized they really need to continue supporting. DX itself provides so much better developer experience than all of the previous versions of the IDEs or even third-party IDEs. And so they realized they really have to enable Salesforce DX to work on org-based development, where still your production is your source of truth. So we'll talk about different strategies and working between what's the difference between those and strategies working with each one of these approaches, and maybe how you'll work to convert from the first to the second one. Mm-hmm. And then you can see what the next one will be.
So the next one will probably be in February.
Early February.
Global gathering in January, which is good because then we'll probably get some more information about the source.
Sandbox source control.
Sandbox source control. So hopefully we'll get some more information on that. So, alrighty, and then again, well, Permjit and then all other people.
Everybody at Carmex that help us organize and guarantee the space and order the pizzas. So thank you to everybody.
If you have not done so, we have a Trailblazer group, the Richmond VA Trailblazer group. Again, we'll post a slide deck. We need to get a bit.ly link for that.
Yes. I think I have a bit.ly.
Most everybody's on the Trailblazer community. If not, this is how we publish the announcements. And then if you're on Twitter, RVASFDUG is where we make announcements as well.
So the first one, by the way, in case you're not familiar with the Trailblazer group, community groups, this is where we can talk, share content, ask questions of people that are in your local community. And then the Trailblazer community second one is where we publish these meetups. There's two Trailblazer community. On the second link, you see it's just Richmond VA, and when you log in there, you'll see the admin group and the developer user group. We have been this year trying to separate and give more developer content separately from admin content. So if you haven't subscribed to the admin group, you should. There's a lot of good content on that side as well. The January one is an example of a combined, the global gathering is going to be admin developer combined meetup. And please follow us on Twitter, because we try to make sure that we make this very vocal on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. And with that, thank you very much for coming out, and have a good evening.
You can talk now.